Welcome to the Plato Paradigm, a paradigm shift in reading Plato's dialogues. Episode 117, Meno 87c to 88a. In the last question that Meno agreed to, what is taught is episteme, and Socrates has dropped the idea of the recollectable. Meno has always been happy with the idea that what is taught is knowledge. This is how he assumes he learns things from the sophists, so this isn't part of the hypothesis. Socrates now bases his hypothesis on Meno's assumption. Eidegestin episteme tis he arete delon hoti didactonan eie. If indeed virtue is some sort of knowledge, it's clear that it would be teachable. How not? In other words, yes, for how could it be otherwise? Many scholars would say that this harks back to Socrates' paradox, the Socratic paradox that virtue is knowledge. The only problem with virtue being knowledge is that you wouldn't do anything. Just being virtuous would mean knowing things. But virtuous people do things, they do good things. Therefore, this isn't what Socrates himself thinks. Unless, of course, Socrates is an idiot. Tutu men aratachu apelagmetha hoti toiude men ontos didacton toiude tu panuge. So we've settled this quickly, that if it is such and such, then it is teachable, and if it is such and such, then it isn't. Absolutely. In other words, if virtue is some sort of knowledge, then it is teachable. If virtue is not some sort of knowledge, then it isn't teachable. Tode meta tuto hos eoike, de skepsastai poterones din episteme he arete e alloion epistemes. The thing after this, so it seems, it's necessary to examine whether virtue is knowledge or something other than knowledge. Well, Socrates isn't wrong. That does follow from this hypothesis. Meno adds his contribution. Emoigedoke tuto meta tuto skepteon enai. It seems to me that this, after this, needs to be examined. It's good to see Meno participating. Tidede, allotie e agathon auto famen enai ten areten, kai haute he hypothesis mene he min, agathon auto enai, panumen un. What then? Do we claim that virtue is anything other than good, something good, and this hypothesis remains to us that it is a good thing? Absolutely. As we've said before in this dialogue, it isn't correct to say that Socrates knows absolutely nothing about virtue. He does know that virtue pertains to good in some way. Is that really a hypothesis that virtue is a good thing? Well, it should be, because it's not true. The virtue itself is a characteristic of something good. If virtue itself were a good thing, then we would have to say that virtue has virtue. We shouldn't be surprised that Meno thinks that virtue is a thing. He's already asked the first question of the dialogue as if virtue is a thing. He's asked whether virtue is something teachable, something exercisable, and so on. Meno does not think in the abstract. Ukun e menti estin agathon kai allo horizomenon epistemes, tachan e he arte uk epistemetis, edem eden estin agathon ho uk episteme perieche, epistemen antin auto hypoptiuontes enai orthos hypoptiuoimen. Esti tauta. Therefore, if there is some good thing and other than knowledge, being separate from it, then virtue would not be some knowledge, some sort of knowledge. But if there is no good thing which knowledge doesn't embrace or encompass, then suspecting that it is some sort of knowledge, we would rightly suspect. That is the case. The last phrase Socrates used is normal in Greek, but we would tend to say we would be right to suspect that it is some sort of knowledge. Kai men arete ges men agathoi? Nai. And by virtue we are good? Yes. This works if virtue is a characteristic. Without the characteristic virtue, we wouldn't be good, because virtue is the characteristic of good people or good things. Ede agathoi o phelimoi, pantagar tagatha o phelima, uchi? Nai. If good, beneficial. In other words, if we are good, we are beneficial. For all good things are beneficial, isn't that so? Yes. Are all good things beneficial? We know from other dialogues that this isn't the case. You can have, for example, a good-looking statue. That doesn't make the statue beneficial. Simply a well-structured statue is good. Why Meno agrees to the idea that whatever is good is beneficial is not completely clear, but if we recall the definitions given by Gorgias, the roles given to various types of people make them beneficial. A good man, for example, benefits his friends. A good woman benefits her household. Kai he aretede ophelimon estin, ananke ekton homologe menon, and virtue is something beneficial, a necessity from the things agreed. If virtue is a good thing, and all good things are beneficial, then virtue itself must be beneficial. Well, virtue would be beneficial if it was the reason for people being virtuous, but it's actually the opposite. Virtuous people have virtue. Virtue is simply the characteristic present when people are virtuous. The only reason virtue here is considered beneficial is because Meno treats virtue as a good thing. And the error is compounded by the notion that any good thing is beneficial. To summarize so far, the only hypothesis we have here is that virtue has something to do with knowledge. That's the hypothesis. All the other points are assumptions Meno already holds. People are good because of virtue. Virtue is a good thing, and therefore virtue is a beneficial thing. Now Socrates turns to what we may call external goods. Skepso methode kathekaston analambanontes, poia estin hahemas ophele. Let's examine then, taking one by one, what sort of things are those which benefit us. Hygiea famen kai ischus kai kallos kai plutos de tauta legomen kai tatoi auto felima uchi? Nai. Health, we claim, and strength, and beauty, and wealth. We say these things and other such things are beneficial, don't we? Yes. It may not be accidental that Socrates refers to all of the characteristics of Meno himself. He seems to be healthy, strong, beautiful, and wealthy, and at least his physical appearance has got him places. It has influenced people, and Meno might consider that to be beneficial. Tauta de tauta famen eniote kai blapten, esu allos ves e hutos, uk al hutos. But these same things we claim sometimes also harm. Or do you claim something else, or thus? No, definitely thus. Why would Meno so readily agree that the characteristics he just said were beneficial are now sometimes also harmful? One possibility is that when Meno thinks of these qualities in himself, they are beneficial, but when those same qualities are in other people, then they are harmful. I'm suggesting this because Meno thinks concretely, and for him it might be a difficult idea to think of something being both beneficial and harmful at the same time, or even in sequence. Even if this is so, Socrates now suggests an alternative way of looking at things. Skopede, hotan ti hekastu tuton hegetai ophelehemas, kai hotan ti blapte, aru hotan men orthe chresis ophele, hotan de me blapte, panuge. Examine then, whenever what governs each of these things, it benefits us, and whenever what, in other words, guides each of these things, it harms. Isn't it whenever there is right use, it benefits, and whenever there isn't, it harms? Absolutely. The word I've translated as use is chresis, and that cis ending means that the word denotes an activity. So literally it would be more like using, the right using of things. The word I have translated as right is orthe, which we see in English words such as orthodox and orthogonal. I could also translate it as correct or upright. The general idea is correct usage, right using. The argument then is that whenever right using governs these things, these good things, then they are beneficial. But when right usage is absent, when there is not right usage, then these good things are harmful. And then the question should be, why should we just be talking about good things? Any things will be beneficial if used correctly and will be harmful if used wrongly. Health, wealth, and beauty are simply intrinsically good things. They are well structured or properly functioning, but even they can be harmful.